Today we are going to get into the second Greek psalm, Psalm 2, picking up with verse 1. It's a lovely psalm. It's the first introduction of Messiah language in the Psalter, so we'll have a lot of fun with it over the next few videos. But let's start with the first verse. Hinate efruaxen ethne, kai laoi meletesan kena. Notice it's a question mark there at the end. Let's start with this opening conjunction here. The hinati might strike you as a bit unusual because you're used to having hina here introduce some sort of subordinate clause that's a so that or an order that. But when you put it together with the neuter nominative form of the interrogative tis, it means something like why or for what reason. And that's a very good translation of the underlying Hebrew lama, which kind of has the same basic component. So why? And then the verb here is efruaxan, which is from fruaso. You'll notice that the double sigma here has essentially undergone a slight little tweak here to become almost a square, a stop situation. So this is a sigma under the hood. You'll see an an ending and an e on the front end. This tells you this is a third plural aorist active indicative. And this word is a little bit tricky to translate. It means something like to be furious, to be insolent, to pitch a fit, something like that. And who's doing it? It's the ethne. This is the plural form of ethnos, the nations. And so the nations are pitching a fit. Well, in verse 2, we'll find out sort of why and against whom they're doing it. But the nations here are raging. And then you'll notice a nice parallel phrasing here. With the kai, you have the laioi are verbing as well. But you'll notice that the subject goes from being in last position to now being in first position. The verb goes from being pre-noun to being after the noun. So it's a nice sort of X pattern, chiastic in some sense here. And it's the laoi here, which would be the peoples. And what are they doing? They're melataoing. And that is a verb for to deliberate, to meditate upon. Notice it has an SA ending just like up here, excluding the square stops. You see an epsilon on the front end, so this is also a third plural aorist active indicative. So why have the nations raged and now the peoples are deliberating or plotting kena, which is the plural of kenas. This means empty, foolish, or vain, something like that. So they are deliberating vain or foolish things. And then again, we'll find out in verse 2 what further is going on. But let's talk about the superscript here. You may be familiar that some of the Psalms have superscripts. That's the little introductory remarks about, oh, it's to David or what have you, while he was doing X, Y, and Z. And you may know that these, generally speaking, start in Psalm 3. They don't apply to every Psalm, but at least in the Masoretic, the Old Greek, most manuscripts, the Vulgate, and your English Bible, you're not going to see any kind of superscript. However, in the Gallican Psalter, some Greek manuscripts, and the Gallican Psalter is a Latin translation by Jerome, and some Coptic, some other witnesses, you do have Psalm of David. Let me just show you a picture of that. This is from a somewhat later manuscript, but it is the Gallican Latin tradition. And you'll notice this is Psalm 2, and it does say Psalm of David before it kicks into the psalm. I find that to be quite intriguing because it shows you that early Christian scribes and translators had the instinct that many of us would have, that Psalm 2 is a messianic psalm. It's about royal kingship, and so they went ahead and threw in David as sort of the category here, as we'll see from many other psalms. So I find that to be quite an interesting thing in the interpretive history of this psalm, that many early Christians were already taking it in a sort of Davidic messianic sense. And so just thought I'd point that out. It's kind of a neat feature in the history of Psalm 2.